field of economics is relatively new, with many historians tracing the discipline back to Adam Smith in the 18th century. In just a few hundred years, though, orthodox economics have developed a number of core theories, many of which are now taken for granted. Take the invisible hand of the free market. Adam Smith's metaphor for how self-interested actions can benefit society at large is still cited in economic discussions today. The benefits of limiting government intervention in markets is another mainstream economic principle popularized by economist Milton Friedman. Some orthodox economists have also argued that their discipline is a science capable of observing and measuring the economy in quantifiable ways. And in recent years, critics of orthodox economics are pushing back against some of those ideas. Jeff Madrick is one of those critics. He's author of the new book, 7 Bad Ideas: How Mainstream Economists Have Damaged America and the World. We talked recently, and I asked about the myths he set out to debunk, starting with the invisible hand.
I call it the beautiful idea. Beautiful, almost in the bad sense of the word, because it's so alluring. It allegedly explains so much. But in fact, it's at best a metaphor that's often wrong. So, for example, it would suggest that people are paid what they deserve. Well, sometimes they are, but often they are not. When economists depend on the invisible hand to do their thinking for them, they'll usually think people are paid what they deserve, and we shouldn't have a higher minimum wage, as one example.
One of the places you might say that as evidence that the invisible hand doesn't always work, the market failures that helped lead up to the credit crisis, the financial collapse. Does that sort of lend argument to this?
Yeah, one of the big reasons I wrote the book is that economic arguments, the mainstream consensus, led up to the crash. The invisible hand suggested, for example, that financial prices should be right. Demand meets supply, and the equilibrium price. We all learned this in micro, or those of us who took micro 1, we learned it. So there shouldn't be a problem. There shouldn't be a need for regulation. That idea swept the American securities authorities, the Fed, the SEC, and so forth, and led principally to the financial crash of 2008.
One starts to see a theme. We'll look at the third one, and that is the role of government and how limited it should be. You would argue, I think, that that small government, invisible government, isn't necessarily the right way to go.
Not at all, and never was. You know, Milton Friedman would say, he was asked by a historian, what was the best time? And he'd say the 1800s, because we had almost no government. That's nonsense. We built the canals. We built the primary school system. We had law and order. We built roads. We developed healthcare, sanitation systems. Those are ridiculous ideas, romantic ideas about the past. And economic convention suggests little role for the government.
And one of the places, of course, that government is attacked right now around policy setting does have to do with inflation. You would attack the idea that low inflation is all that matters. It's become a preoccupation, you could say, of central banks in the last 20 years. It's not right?
It's not right. No, there are lots of things they should be thinking about. Low inflation won't solve all the problems on its own. It's become an obsession, and a dangerous obsession, and it's led to higher unemployment and fewer jobs than we need.
One of the most important, I think, that you seek to debunk is efficient market theory, because it is one that's so appealing. It's very tidy. It does let us kind of let things take their course, and yet we have market bubbles, and market bubbles do fly in the face of efficient market theory.
Exactly.
So why do we cling to this one?
Well, at one time it was very useful. It suggested investment managers can't beat the market. Buy index funds, funds that replicate market averages, for example. Then it got out of hand. Then we began to believe the stock price was the right price. The stock price actually reflected the real value of a corporation. Also mortgage securities, also bonds, and so on and so forth. We didn't imagine there could be more than a very temporary bubble. Efficient markets theory, in fact, goes back to the invisible hand. The invisible hand works in those markets. It's led us down a path towards crash.
And it does, of course, allow us down other paths, including giving us some trust and faith that you can kind of write at large. So we get to globalization and we say, well, yes, there will be dislocations, but ultimately we're just creating a bigger market, and if we trust the market, all will be well.
Right. Globalization is the invisible hand everywhere, and it's going to work its magic anywhere without oversight. Free trade will solve all problems, free flow of capital. We had lots of problems. We had financial crisis in 97 and 1998 overseas because of the flow of capital. We've had lots of globalization problems. We have to remember one thing. Free trade can be good and it can be bad, but there are almost always losers. And if we adopt free trade in America, which we've done gradually over time, and it's by and I wouldn't even say by and large, but often helpful, we also have to adopt safety net procedures to protect workers who lose and even businesses who lose.
The last is one of my favorites, which is this myth that economics is a science, because again, we want to be able to believe in things that are linear and analytical. I think you're going to make the case that we're talking about a lot more subjectivity here.
Yeah, and a lot more variables, a lot of things that are hard to pin down. I deal all the time with, is big government bad? Well, economists can't even agree on that. They can't even agree on high taxes being bad. In fact, the preponderance of evidence shows they're not. They don't subdue growth. So is that a science?
Where all of this leaves me to ask you is, it does seem as though increasingly folks come down on one side of these or the other, and a lot of them are grouped together. If you're an efficient market theorist, you believe in the invisible hand and globalization and small government, should we be looking for some middle ground where some of it is right and good and some of it needs to be tempered?
Well, you raise a very good point. I think there's an a priori, a before the fact ideology that influences economists on both sides of the issue. I think what the most important thing we've got to recognize is that economics shouldn't be clean. It shouldn't be easy. It should be dirty. One of the big problems with the Fed is they didn't look under the hood of all those financial securities. They didn't even know how they worked. That's what we got to do. We have to have dirty economics.
We got to leave it there. We appreciate your time. Jeff Madrick is the author of 7 Bad Ideas: How Mainstream Economists Have Damaged America and the World.